Good evening. Welcome to Chatbox with Sam. Tonight's guest is KZ Howell. He is an author. I hope you enjoy the show.
Hi, Samantha. How are you?
I'm good, KZ, and how are you doing?
Oh, doing just fine.
Well, welcome to Chatbox with Sam. I'm really honoured to have you on the show. I've been speaking to you for some time in social media, and we've been on some live streams together, which have been fun, and the Zooms. If you were to encourage the younger generation, what would be the main focus and why?
If you're interested in something, start it. Don't wait for a better time. Don't wait for a more opportune moment. Get started. The opportunities will come once you start, but until you started, nothing's going to happen.
For the future generation, what would the best advice you could give them regarding life?
Don't take the idea of not caring what other people think as gospel. Anything that you want to do that means anything is going to involve other people, and what they think of you is going to make a difference. Go your own way, but always keep in mind that the way people see you is how they're going to react to you and how they're going to treat you. If you're a jerk, if you ignore people until you need them, they're going to turn around and do the same to you.
Mm-hmm. Very good advice, KZ. Thank you. What inspired you into writing these books? And what was the method behind it?
Well, I started writing in the late '90s, and but I was writing basically economic books back then. Uh, but I've always had. I grew up around my father and my uncle, and they were always telling stories, big stories, just obviously made up bull, but it was always fun to listen to. Uh, and I guess I kind of got that in my head, where you get an idea, and you start telling the story, and the story just gets bigger. Uh, and the I got into fiction, years after doing more technical math based things, economics and options trading mostly. But I always wanted to. I was always a fan of science fiction, and I always wanted to write something like that. So when my kids were little and I was just working all the time and then going home, uh, you know, the I would just develop the stories in my head, tell some of them to the kids, and just build on them from there.
Hmm.
Uh, and I guess it just grew into they got too big for my head. I needed to put them on paper.
That's awesome. Has music influenced your life in any way?
Yeah, of course. Uh, I grew up. I mean, we moved around a lot when I was a kid, and my mother and father both actually were big music fans. So there was always Elvis or some country band, playing in the house or in the car or whatever. And when my older brother started high school, we went to Memphis and stayed there. We had lived there a couple of times before. My dad did construction work, so we moved around a lot. But when my older brother started high school a year ahead of me, uh, my parents set down roots so we could do high school in one place without having to bounce all over creation. And Memphis, it's a music town. It was in those days, uh, and everything that we did as kids revolved around music or cars. So yeah, you either got into music or you didn't have many friends.
And music makes memories, as I've said to a few other people I've interviewed, and
That
they
that
all
it does.
agree. They all
I mean,
agree.
you always remember. You always remember your first concert, your first barroom band. Uh, you know, especially when you're young, everything revolves around or has music built into it.
It certainly does. I have quite a few memories with music too, especially in the 80s, dancing in the discotheques. And they're therapeutic as well.
Yep.
What out of all the charities that you could choose from, which one would you choose and why?
St. Jude Children's Hospital. St. Jude does nothing but treat children, and that's all they do. Every nickel they raise goes to that. That's been there for God, a million years, I guess, ever since Danny Thomas started it, and uh, there's never been a hint of them doing anything other than doing exactly what they said, taking care of kids.
And children are very special and they need taking care of, and the hospitals do need the funding. That's a very
Yep.
good
And
charity.
St. Jude takes the hardest cases, never charges a nickel.
That's another good reason because some charities out there they take a lot of admin fees and the whole percentage doesn't go to the charity like it should go to the charity.
Yep. I've I've been like I said, I was in Memphis for years, years and years and years. I've been around St. Jude. I've worked out there a couple of times, and just you could not ask for a better organization.
Thank you. I hope people take that advice and donate to them too. How do you feel about what has transpired since COVID 19? And do you ever see us returning to a normality?
That's a loaded question right there. Uh,
It's fully loaded and you may carry on. I want people to share what they felt and how it affected them, how it affected their friends, how you think it affected the world.
COVID, not to detract from how dangerous it is or anything else. The problem with it, I mean, 2011 we had the swine flu epidemic. Uh, Under Obama during 2012, 2013, they imported Ebola into the United States. Before, I mean, that had never been done. If you were even vaguely associated with an Ebola outbreak, you were barred. You weren't coming into this country. Um, we've had the avian flu fears for decades. Various versions of it. H5N1. You pick an avian flu, and we've had a scare with it. COVID comes in, and suddenly there's an opportunity. A lot of people took advantage of the fear that had been generated over years using H1N1, the avian variations of influenza, even normal influenza, uh, the Ebola scares, uh, and people suddenly decided they could take advantage of it for political and economic reasons.
Mm-hmm.
There was never any reason whatsoever for all the lockdowns and all this other stuff. That's not how pandemics or viruses work. You don't jail the healthy. You quarantine the sick. You shut your borders down to prevent it from coming in and spreading. They did none of that. They locked up 330 million American citizens, but they kept the borders open. They kept flying people in from Europe until Trump shut that down. I'm not giving Trump any more credit than getting lucky on a couple of things. And I'm not blaming anybody for anything, even though quite a few of them deserve a hell of a lot of blame. But destroying an economy for something you cannot stop and destroying a nation for your own benefit, the way that they've done, is criminal. Now, that opinion is probably going to get me in trouble, and I don't really care because it's the truth. Most of this is complete and utter bullshit. It's a dangerous disease. You cannot stop a virus. We've known this for thousands of years. We've known it down to the down to the genes of the virus for 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yet all of a sudden, here comes one that they give magical properties. I mean, literally magical properties. This virus knows not to go into the Walmart store, but it will go into the school. But it won't attack the kids, but it will attack the teachers and the staff. It'll get the bus drivers. It'll get the restaurant workers, but it won't get the gas station attendants. Now, you tell me that that last paragraph. You tell me where any sanity is in that, or where there's any science to it.
It could seem very contradictory.
It's completely contradictory. Viruses simply don't work that way.
And politics should
Nothing
never
works that way.
politics should never been brought into it. It should have been just science.
Yes, exactly. You can go one way or the other, but you can't have your cake and eat it too. When when your cake is killing your nation, and not having it is enriching lots and lots of people, but just completely devastating everyone else. We still have tens of millions of people unemployed for a year, over a year. That's ridiculous.
How do you feel about the vaccine, Moderna, Pfizer?
That's another one that's going to get me in trouble one of these days. None of these have been approved. They're talking about demanding that your children have it to go to school. These are unapproved experiments. When you go to get it, you notice they make you sign a piece of paper. They have an emergency use authorization, which means that you can't sue them or the government if there are side effects later on. An approved FDA approval, they're years away from on any of them because they haven't been tested. They're being tested on the population to see what happens. Um, Now, is it wrong for them to do this? Probably not, but they need to quit telling people that they've been approved when they've not. When you go in to get it, they make you sign a piece of paper that says that you're aware that they're unapproved drugs and that they're experimental and only allowed to be given to humans under an emergency use authorization. That's not an approval.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that protects Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson and Johnson, so on and so forth. They can't be sued if this turns out to be another thalidomide.
Do you think they can make it mandatory, or do you think that would be against the constitutional civil right?
It would be unconstitutional in every way, shape, form, and fashion. So the government isn't going to try and do that. They're going to try and pass that off to make, excuse me, to make corporate America make it mandatory. That's why I mentioned that they were gonna make it mandatory for your kids to go to school. They're going to pass that off because if they try to do it through the federal government, we'd be shooting at each other in 6 weeks. So they're going to try and pass it off and get corporate America to do it. You can't do it. You can't get on an airplane if you don't have it. You can't go in a store. You can't go to work, so on and so forth. Now they have exempted under an emergency use authorization. You can't sue the drug manufacturers or the government. You sign away that right before they use you the shot. That paper they hand you. It tells you it's not an approved medication. It's an experiment.
Then what if you refuse? What if you refuse it to sign the paper?
You won't get shot. So you take that into consideration. So they're not gonna under any law passed by Congress. They're not gonna make it mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
They know that would be a complete and utter disaster. Uh, so they're trying to get corporate America to make it mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
Corporate America has no power. They only have the power we give them.
Exactly.
And They keep saying, well, your kids already have to have all these other shots. All those other shots your kids got to have to go to school. Been approved for decades.
Mm-hmm.
They've been tested and used, and we know what the side effects are. We know how much of a risk they are because they were FDA approved and have been for decades. But you'll notice they keep saying, you know, if your kids have to have these to go to school, why not this one? Well, this one's not approved. This one's brand new. This has never been used in humans before.
Mm-hmm.
mRNA, mRNA vaccines have never been used in humans before. You can barely get them licensed to use on animals because they don't know what's going to happen 10 years down the road.
Mm-hmm. Can be pretty scary. New new
Yeah,
vaccines.
it's totally new technology as well, and that's the problem with it. I mean, if this were, normal vaccines are, uh, uh, we've known how they work for nearly 100 years. We have no the idea how these work because they've only been around for about a year and a half, 2 years. They've been on the drawing board and in the research stage for years, but we don't know how they actually work in a human host. It makes your cells produce a protein that your cells are not supposed to produce. Okay, that's fine and dandy if it goes against the COVID virus. Is that the only thing it goes against? It's the only time that new, unique, forced, genetically modified protein going to be produced by your body? Is that the only thing it's going to go at?
Mm-hmm.
And we have no earthly idea yet.
A lot of people are saying that it doesn't change your DNA at all.
You can't change an existing organism's DNA at all. That's not what this does. That's another misunderstanding or deliberate misstatement of what it does. It it goes in and tells your body to produce a protein. That's not changing your DNA. That's changing your body chemistry,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not changing your DNA. Now, is this change permanent? Is this change temporary? Who knows? And that's the problem. Who knows? Because there's not a single serious person out there who's going to tell you that they do know. If they do, they're lying because it's never been done before.
Yeah, it's a brand new
And I have
thing.
no idea what it's going to do in the long run, but neither does anybody else.
Very true. It's an experimental drug.
Yes, I mean, that's what it is, and that's fine and dandy if they want to do that and offer it up to people who are afraid or who are at really great risk. Uh, but all this hype that they keep pushing and the fact that they just bald faced lie on the news uh, about everything, which I think is all the news does anymore is lie through their teeth. Uh, that's not fair to people.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, KZ. That was very insightful, and I know the audience will agree or not agree. But opinions and thoughts. That's why I ask people to come on the show because everyone's entitled to their opinion, facts, or everyone's entitled to their thoughts, and we're all the same yet uniquely different. And I hope people still accept that we're allowed to have different mindsets, that we're allowed to have a different thought process. We don't always have to think the same thing. It doesn't mean we're any less intelligent of a human being because we don't think the same wavelength as somebody else. You know, just trust, look at the science, past science. But I thank you for your answers. I really appreciated them.
Well, if that all needs to hit the cutting room floor, that's fine and dandy with me because I've had this argument so many times I'm blue in the face.
I know. KZ, you're an author. Could you please talk
There's,
about the books you've wrote? Um, and what inspired you to write them, and the books that have been published, and any books that were not published?
Revelation was the first uh, non, I guess, math-based book I ever wrote. The first science fiction, uh, and after that, I did one uh, based on a couple of psychopaths. I dolled the story up a good bit, uh, called uh, "The Devil's You." Uh, that one was out for about a year and a half before Amazon pulled it. I also did a short history pamphlet. It's not quite a book. Uh, it's not quite big enough to be a book, but it's a very short explanation of how radical feminism was introduced into the United States and its history up to about the end of World War II, a little bit past up into the 60s.
Why do you think Amazon pulled the book?
They never really said. They just said it might offend some of their readers. Now it was fairly graphic, sexually and uh, uh, violently, but it's basically based on two of the most violent psychopaths in history. So yeah, uh, and it was out for a year and a half. They never said anything. They were happy to sell it for that long. I don't know. I don't know why or what. But I don't much care anymore, except for a TV series now. So I don't. I really don't care.
Oh, it's a TV series.
Well, it maybe.
Okay, so you can't really speak about that.
Yeah, they haven't decided yet. They've come back and forth for about 6 months now. So I'm not sure how that's going to turn out. But hell, it's better than it doing nothing.
And the other books that you've wrote that are on Amazon?
Dream State is also a um, it, I guess you call it sci-fi more than anything else. It's part thriller though too, and it's based on I was a big fan of reading about Edgar Cayce, the Sleeping Prophet, and something about that just kind of uh, hit a nerve, and I changed his story around a little bit uh, to the NSA wanting to have a way to duplicate Edgar Cayce's being able to uh, go into a trance and dream about faraway places. And Edgar Cayce was just accurate as heck with it. I mean, it's very, very spooky and a great story. So I just kind of adapted that, and played it out some into a modern setting and a modern thriller setting. Uh, and let's see, Dead World. I actually wrote a year. I published it over a year before COVID came out, and it is spookily, eerily close uh, to COVID. And the I played it out differently. It started the same, but I played it out differently, and it's kind of a post-apocalyptic, not not sci-fi, other than how the virus was worked into it. Uh, but it's kind of a cross between uh, maybe The Walking Dead and Legend.
That sounds really interesting. I'll definitely read that book. Definitely. And you can buy KZ's books on Amazon. He has his own page on there. Wow. And Edgar Cayce, that's the psychic, right?
Yeah, they called him the Sleeping Prophet. He would do all the psychic stuff basically in a trance or a dream state, sleeping, and his secretary would record all the stuff that he said in this state. And he, the way they wrote him down was kind of like uh, Nostradamus' quatrain. You had to put it all together after the fact because he would speak in very short sentences, in this state, uh, and he'd go subject to subject to subject. Sometimes, sometimes he would read on the subject he wanted to, and then sometimes it would turn to something completely different. The way Casey worked, there was actually interest when he was alive in him doing some of these for the government. I don't know whether he ever did or not. A lot of his files are still, I'm not going to call them classified, but they're not public. So we don't really know whether he ever actually worked for the government or not. Uh, and I just thought it was a fascinating story. So I embellished it a little bit, put it in a thriller setting, in a modern day setting, and uh, had the NSA get their grubby little hand in the middle of it. Uh, it turned out to be a pretty good little story.
Thank you. That's another interesting book that people should look out for. Edgar Casey. You've done a lot of research on different topics, criminology, and obviously Edgar Casey. Is there any other books that you'd love people to read that would be
Not that have been
insightful to them?
not 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 that are published yet. I've got a couple in the wings. Another the follow on to Revelation, which is at a minimum a three-part series, and they're huge books. The scope is just massive. Uh, and Devil's Due, I've written another longer story coming out of the first part. I don't know if Uh, I'm not sure if I'm going to ever publish that one or not because of how the first one got treated. Uh, if I do, I may go someplace besides Amazon. I may try and even traditionally publish it because it's a much longer, more involved uh, story and runs a little bit more towards John Wick type thriller elements with the psychopath anti-hero, uh, as basically losing his mind and deciding to flip and kill everybody,
Well,
essentially.
I think everybody loves a bit of John Wick because Keanu Reeves plays the lead role.
Yeah.
But it is a very good movie. Yes. Everyone was angry more about the puppy being killed than the actual human beings.
Oh yeah, yeah. That really annoyed people. You can see the memes on the internet where even what's his name, uh, the bad guy from Avengers. Good lord, I can't even think of it. Thanos.
Yeah.
Even Thanos gets worried when somebody tells him he kills John Wick's puppy.
Exactly. Don't hurt the puppies. You have to put that in one of your books. Similar, not the same. That will definitely spark people's emotions. Yeah, no one likes to see anyone hurting a puppy or a child or anyone really. Well, thank you, Casey. Would you like to share a little bit about your life?
Basically the same as everybody else who came up in the generation I did. Moved around a lot when I was a kid. As soon as I graduated high school, I went into the army and stayed there for well long enough, uh, and just got out and went to work. Uh, there's not a lot of variation from my generation as to how we did things. I mean that's just pretty much how things went. A lot of us went into the military, and the rest went into business, uh, or out into the workforce. Uh, I'm probably from the most boring damn generation ever, to be honest.
No, we're not. I thought it was very. I liked it. I like growing up in my generation.
Well, it's a we didn't have a great world war that anybody knew about. Uh, Everything was either technology or all the booms and busts we've had.
Mm-hmm.
That's how everybody identifies themselves. And now our generation did identify itself more through music than any other. And I'll give us that. And we had the best music.
Oh,
From
the 80s was definitely the best music. Absolutely.
uh, uh, well, maybe. Uh, I, I,
That's
I, I'm gonna
awesome.
I'm like a Fleetwood Mac and Aerosmith fan, and they were in the '80s, but they came out long before that, and we had the Who, uh,
Yes.
and
Tom Petty.
just
I was listening to that
Tom Petty,
today in the radio.
just just so many who came up in the '70s. Peter Frampton. I mean,
Hmm.
who out there is even trying to be Peter Frampton now? Nobody. Uh, totally different musical world, and our
Yeah,
generation was the best at that.
I know. We had some good rock music too.
Yep.
Yeah.
We had rock, we had the blues, BB King, and so many others. And there's just not that many people out there now who can even play an actual instrument that doesn't have a computer pushing the buttons on.
Right.
And
Definitely.
quite frankly, most of them can't sing without an auto tune either. But that's my opinion.
I love your opinion. It's very matter of fact, and that's why I like
Well,
you.
it's the truth. Everything now goes through at least two computers.
Mhm.
And back then, uh, the most technologically advanced thing uh, back then was when Boston came out
Mhm.
and used a Moog, which nobody's ever heard of now, but the first synthesizer on a couple of their albums, and that was as technological as it got. Now most albums don't have a single live player on.
No, we had this show in England called Top of the Pops, and the the artists would come on, and they were all lip syncing their own song.
Yeah,
They weren't allowed to record live.
yeah.
Yeah, they weren't allowed to sing live. It was like their song, and they were lip syncing it. And I was like, and I didn't know that. Someone told me that, but I don't know whether it's true. I think it's true. And I was like,
It
what's the
probably is.
point?
They tried to get Queen to do that. I don't know if they ever agreed to it or not. Can you imagine Freddie Mercury agreeing to that?
No.
I can imagine somebody going up to Mick Fleetwood and saying, "We want you to pretend to play the drums." About a 7 foot tall, half bald guy with a Bigfoot hair,
Stevie would.
standing there say, "What?"
I know, right? I know. But we liked it as kids growing up. That was the 70s. Top of the Pops, that went through for quite a long time. And if they were number one, they'd be the last song on the show. And I remember this one song coming on, and she was Top of the Pops for a long time. And I was like, oh, I'm so sick of this song. Can't you change it? I'd heard it that much. And, it's one of them soppy songs. I was like, oh. And then we had Wonder War. That was a funny one that came on there. This is a really goofy guy singing Wonder War. But we had
The
some good
top of the pops I've heard of. I don't think I've ever heard of Wonder War.
Wonder War. I can't remember the name of the song. I'm terrible with names, actually. But I'm not going to sing either because I might break the mic. But yeah, the song. I'll send it to you, and I'll send it to you on YouTube. I won't post it on Twitter because people might think, "What's that?" But we had to listen to that for weeks. But it was kind of funny. It was a very goofy singer. He was funny. KZ, thank you very much for coming on Chatbox with Sam. I've really enjoyed your answers. Thank you very much. I'm honoured to have you on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
You are very, very welcome.